Welcome to UFOs over Pittsburgh. I'm your host, John Ventry. I'm the Pennsylvania State Director for the Mutual UFO Network. Our co-host is Fred Saluga, who is the West Virginia State Director for MUFON and our Western Pennsylvania Regional Director. Our guest today is Joe Jordan, who is the MUFON Director for South Korea, as we discuss UFOs and religion via Skype, all the way from South Korea. So Joe, thanks for being on our show all the way from South Korea. How are you?
I'm good, John, and thanks for having me on. I think it's going to be quite an interesting show for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when is the last time you saw Fred Saluga? Because he knows you from Florida.
Oh yeah, I know Fred. I guess it's probably been about 10 years now, maybe going on 10 years. You know, my question to him is, did he ever think he'd end up back here with me and, you know, in this particular arena?
No, I didn't.
Now, how do you know Joe, Fred? How did you meet Joe?
Joe used to be the state section director down in, I think it was Cocoa Beach, right, Joe, or Merritt Beach?
Yeah.
Cocoa Beach.
Brevard County.
Brevard County, and I used to go down there from Daytona for the UFO meetings down there.
Okay.
He used to have every month.
Okay.
And Joe actually is the one that got me into MUFON.
Okay. When was that? Around what year would you say that you got
That was about 95, right, Joe?
Yeah, right. About 10 years now.
Okay. All right. So Joe, you're doing UFO investigations, and like everyone else, you know, you're told they're nuts and bolts. They fly here from Zeta Reticuli, and then you come across some people who tell you a few things on how they repelled the alien abduction. So tell us your reaction and how did that go when you started seeing a pattern?
Well, when I first got into the UFO phenomenon, I was pretty much an agnostic humanist. I didn't have any religious background, no spirituality background, and I didn't really believe in the whole idea of aliens and extraterrestrials. I was an avid science fiction reader when I was younger, and when I first got introduced to this UFO phenomenon, it was through a book I picked up at the airport on the way to Alaska to visit my brother. And the book was what I thought was a science fiction book, but when I turned around and looked at it, you know, it was reading as that it was a science investigation into an event that sounded science fiction. And that was UFO crash at Roswell. And that introduced me into the UFO phenomenon. But I still didn't really believe that it was extraterrestrial. I said, this was something you're going to have to show me, you know. And as I got into MUFON and I started holding meetings, and I started listening to people that were abduction experiencers, I felt that they were probably the forefront of the UFO phenomenon. If you're going to investigate, get to the truth of the matter, you need to be talking to the people that were on the front line. And it was the abductees that focused our attention on. And it was quite a few years that went by working with the abduction experiencers before we came across one that had actually said that he had been able to stop the experience. And when we came across that one particular case, we knew we had something that puzzled us, because all the other leading top researchers said that that wasn't possible, to be able to terminate an abduction experience. But yet we had one that did. And that led to a lot of questions, with the leading researchers to find out what did we just come across.
And what did that person tell you? How did they repel this abduction?
Well, the person in there giving their testimony of the experience, they claimed that they had been a new Christian going to a small local church, and they had had abduction experiences prior to becoming a Christian. But during this one particular experience, it became very frightening for them. The experience was very traumatic. It actually scared the living hell out of them. And they had nothing else they could think of to do but call out, "Jesus, Jesus, help me," or "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." And when it did, the experience abruptly stopped. And the person felt like they were slammed down on the bed. And even to the point where their wife woke up and said, "Why are you jumping up and down on the bed?" So it was a typical type experience, but the idea that they were in another location, something was happening to them like a medical type experiment, and then all of a sudden it's abruptly ended and they're waking up due to calling on that name and authority of Jesus Christ.
Now, with any scientific explanation, it has to be repeatable, verifiable. Did you come across any other cases where somebody told you the same thing?
Well, once we realized we had something very different here, our next step was to contact some of the leading researchers in the realm and talk to them personally and try to understand what happened here with this particular case, and was it even something real to even be considered. And as I talked to these leading researchers, I said, "I've got a very unique case here I'd like to share with you. I'm not sure what to make of it. I'm not sure whether it's real. I'm not sure if it's something I just need to discard and move on." And I shared the story with these guys, these leading researchers, and each time I did, they'd ask to go off the record. And, when you ask to go off the record, you have to give these people their anonymity when they ask for it. That's part of being MUFON.
Yeah.
Is, we have to respect person's identity if they ask for that. And I do, and I did at the time. And I said, "Okay, I'll accept that. We'll go off the record," which means I can tell you what they said, but I can't tell you who said it.
Yeah.
And the answer to the question about the experience that I got from these guys were, we too had also come across similar cases where people had been saying a prayer or singing a Christian hymn or using the name of Jesus, and experience stopped. And I said, "Well, if that's the truth, then why have you never shared that information? Because actually you guys share that these experiences cannot be stopped." And the answer to that was, we really didn't know what to make of that. And I would have actually been quite fine with that answer, except that it seemed to be followed by a second answer where they said that we were afraid to go there because it might affect our credibility in the realm. In other words, they weren't willing to get into the idea that there might be a religious aspect to the UFO abduction phenomenon. So what we're looking at here is these researchers have the same information. They've come across these type of cases, but yet they chose not to share the information. And I told them that I said, "Thank you for talking to me on this subject in this particular case. And you've let me know that there's more cases like this." And I said that, you may not feel comfortable working in this area, but I said, "I've got nothing to lose here. And I'm going to take this particular piece of the UFO puzzle and I'm going to run with it. I'm going to find those cases and I'm going to document those cases, and I'm going to make sure that they're available for scrutiny," which I have for 20 years now. Now, as far as the repeatability aspect of it, as we started documenting the cases and putting them up on the website, making them available for anyone to look at, people started reading those that were having these abduction experiences, and they saw that we were posting testimonies of people that have been able to be set free from the experience, and from all the traumatic issues that that come with it. And they were asking us, and could we help them? And I never thought about getting into that part of the work, but I said, well, I think we can. I said, we can take what we've learned from these people, we can share it with you, and show you what's worked for them, and hopefully you too can be set free from this experience. And lo and behold, yes, that was happening. So we did have a repeatability aspect to this, where if somebody came to us and said, I too would like this experience to stop, then we were able to guide them and help them to the point that they could also make it stop, like the people that we're reading about that were already on the website.
And what is your website so people can go look at these?
It's www.ce4research.com. The group is CE4 Research. The reason we titled it CE4 Research is CE4 stands for Close Encounter Fourth Kind, and that's Jack Vallee's classification for the abduction experience.
Okay. Now, we talked previously, and I told you about this, what I believe to be a very malevolent, I think it's a demonic attack on me since Thanksgiving. And, it's funny, I gave this talk at the Erie conference, just 3 days ago, and I gauged things by book sales. I had sold a bunch of books, and then I gave my talk. Only one person bought my book after the talk. It's also like the Kecksburg explanation, where we have found a U.S. spy satellite that fits in for the Kecksburg explanation. Right. Nobody is interested in that. So it's a very interesting, social experiment. That lady in the front row, she was there to hear UFOs are here to help us. There's some metaphysical message that they're tapping into. They're going to cure diseases, clean up our environment, all that. She was there for a positive message. She got all upset. Yeah. This is very negative, she was saying.
She even went out in the hall. She was complaining.
Yeah, I saw you and
her
talking out there. But they're looking for something else.
Right.
And we already have what it is that they need, but they're looking for a savior in this UFO phenomenon. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I think a lot of these people, they get into it, and they get into where they're reading where UFOs are here to help us, UFOs are here to help us, UFOs are here to do this and this and that, this and that. And this is what they believe. I mean, they can't believe that they're actually here to harm us. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people like that.
Yeah, I mean, my conclusion is they're not here to help, and there's a handful of instances where they did help somebody, but I would say it's like any other con job. That's where, they got to sometimes help,
Right.
They got to keep the spin going.
Or they could be another group altogether.
Yeah, or it could be another group
the
altogether.
Good and the bad.
So, Joe, I mentioned to you we were going to sit down and have a round table Friday night before the conference with the speakers, and it was really interesting. I don't think they had any idea what I was going to talk to them about, the demonic and malevolent, and is this really the UFO phenomenon? And Dr. David Jacobs said he's done 1,700 regressive hypnosis, I think on only 150 people though, but he's never come across a malevolent spirit. And we, Nick Redfern, Kathy Martin, myself, and a couple other people there said, well, wait a minute, there's plenty of cases where this has been described as very malevolent. And Dr. Jacobs said he's never seen that in his research. So I was a little surprised with that. Nick Redfern said to me, you're trying to explain everything unexplained, and he says, you can't do that. I said, yeah, I'm looking for the string theory of everything. Because, in this field, people investigate Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, religion, all these different things, but nobody really tries to tie them all together. I believe there is a string theory to the whole thing. But people, no, I'm only looking at ghosts, and that's what it is, you know?
Well, but I think that this is the way they think. I mean, it's like, I believe ghosts, Bigfoot, all the cryptids, okay? Ghosts, cryptids, and aliens are all on the same tree, but a different branch. And I mean, if we really look at it, you know, like you look at a ghost and you look at an alien, there are people that do ghost hunting now, they're seeing aliens in the ghost realm. People that hunt aliens are saying they see ghosts in the realm. You get abducted, you'll see your grandmother, your grandfather up there. Is that really your grandmother, grandfather, or what? I mean, you know. And I think also you got, if you go back in history, UFOs has been involved with religion since the beginning of time, with Moses and everything else. I mean, so there has to be something with it. I mean, you know.
But what I come across, Joe, is such a, boy, there's such a negative reaction when you bring religion into this. You mentioned Jesus. It's like all of a sudden it's Bible thumpers, but I said, wait a second, this is written. It's been written. I mean, we're trying to figure something out that's been written 2,000 years ago, that this is the way it's going to be. You know, and I put that slide up. You want disclosure. To me, disclosure is the start of the end of days.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a deception. It's not going to be. But Joe, it's amazing the hostility when you try to use a spiritual explanation for this thing that is unexplained, but you know, it seems to be like it's interdimensional.
Right. Well, it is. It is. And I think, like you say,
that's,
go ahead, Joe.
you know, and that's a move that's slowly happened over the past couple decades. You know, 20 years ago when I first got into this, there was no talk of, you know, it being interdimensional beings. You know, it was strictly physical ET. You know, but it's changed, and as they could not find answers and evidence for an actual physical experience, and they couldn't explain, you know, the weirdness part of it, like Nick Redfern talks about, you know, it started throwing up red flags that you had to consider and take a look at. And I think, you know, as time changed and as they realized they didn't have answers for this, that's when you started hearing the terminology of interdimensional. When I did the 2008 conference in Roswell, for the city of Roswell in 2008, one of the speakers we had, Richard Dolan, up there, when he did his talk, you know, he brought up the idea that this could possibly be an interdimensional aspect to these beings. And I thought, bingo, you know, finally these guys are starting to come around. And I'll take the idea that they can use the term interdimensional, you know, that gets us that much closer to understanding and accepting the idea that this could be a spiritual entity instead of, you know, a physical entity.
But you know, Joe, if you go on the FBI webpage where they got the UFOs, their thing with the UFOs, they actually say back in 1948 that ET is interdimensional, which is really interesting.
Well, you know, Joe, the other thing that came up, and I think you're familiar with the Collins Elite, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I brought that up because that's why I had Nick Redfern as a speaker, was to tell the audience. And you know, David Jacobs didn't know anything about the Collins Elite. And I think 95% of the people in this field don't know anything about it. That, you know, if you got this smoking gun of a branch of the CIA that was investigating the occult, and then in 1952 was tasked with investigating UFOs when they were over DC, and their conclusion is there are no UFOs, it's all occult, meaning demonic.
Right.
That's huge, you know. But again, it's like nobody wants to hear that.
But like I said, they don't want that. They want you to think that there's UFOs out there.
Yeah.
It's like you say, if there was disclosure and this all came out, what would happen? I mean, there's a lot of money being made with all of this stuff. And I mean, it wouldn't be there again. I mean, you know.
But yet there is something out there, right?
Right, there is, yeah.
I mean, and it is unidentified, so there are UFOs, but the question is, what is the origin of them? And, you know, and I say this to people, you know, who are into the metaphysical. You think you're tapping into some universal consciousness.
Right.
I'm telling you, be very leery as to what the source of that information is. who you're tapping into. You have no idea. And they get all mad. Whoa, this is good. Well, I don't think it is. It's my opinion. I don't think it is.
But I think if you,
You know, I spent time myself in that realm, in the New Age realm, before I became a Christian, and that was something that as I look back on it, we were welcoming spiritual entities at that time that I was in the New Age, and the New Age people do this, the metaphysical people. They're welcoming some type of entity that's willing to come in and give them all sorts of crazy insight or information or enlightenment. But yet, if a stranger comes to their door or their home, they won't let them in. So it's kind of puzzling to me. On one aspect, they're free to open their mind to whatever, but they're afraid as can be to open their front door of their home to a stranger.
Okay, so we got this phenomenon that's unexplained. You wrote this book, which I've referred to on this show a couple of times, called Unholy Communion, the Alien Abduction Phenomenon, Where It Originates and How It Stops. And you wrote this with David Ruffino and Joe Jordan. I got a couple of quotes in here I want to just read out, but you want to tell us a little bit on how you guys hooked up? How did you write this book? How did this thing get started?
Well, that was about 2005, I do believe. We were out in, we had connected right before the Roswell event in 2005. Somebody was familiar with David, and here I was in Florida, and I was at an event with Gary Bates from Creation Ministries International. He had just written his book and got it published, Alien Intrusion, UFOs and the Evolution Connection. And he was on his tour, showing his book and doing his talk. And I was there at one of the talks, and somebody left a card on the table for delusion resistance, and that happened to be David Ruffino. And I looked it up, and I realized that he was pretty much on the same page with what I was doing at the time, but just from a couple other aspects involved also that he was looking at. So I connected with him, and we ended up meeting and going to the Roswell Festival in 2005. Guy Malone, my partner, had a conference scheduled, one of our H of the Days conference scheduled, and I was speaking there. So we went there and we talked about this, and I'd read a lot of David's stuff on his website, and he seemed to be a pretty good writer, and I'm not a writer. I can't even seem to write a letter to my own family, here from Korea, but I can talk, and I don't mind talking in front of the public, and I can go a couple hours at a time, no problem. But when it came to writing a book, I know the information needed to be put out there. So I talked to David about that, and I said, hey, would you be interested in writing a book? I can supply you with the information, the testimonies that I have, and any part of the story that needs to be covered on how we got to where we're at with all of this today. And he agreed, and he started doing the writing. He did the writing for the book. I supplied my part of the work that I had done with CE4. But by the time we got the book ready for print, some things had changed in my thinking, and my thinking's changed over the years as I do more and more research. And at the time that we were working together and agreed to work on the book, I still left an open door that there was a possibility that these abduction experiences were actually physical experiences, that people could actually be taken somewhere, that could be removed from their homes, removed from their cars or whatever. But the more I continued the research, the deeper I got into it, the more I realized that that was just a deeper part of the delusion, that this was not a physical experience, that this was only an experience that happens in the mind. People are not really taken anywhere. They're not actually removed. The experience itself, the entities behind this experience, can give that delusion that the people actually believe that that's happened. It's that traumatic of experience that it's hard for the people that have had it to determine whether it's actually happened to them or something that's in the mind. And this is the hard part about working with this subject. David could not change that thinking. David actually believes that there is a physical aspect to it. But by the time the book was published, I had changed my thinking and I could no longer support the book, which is a shame because there's a lot of good stuff in the book, But leaving that door open, thinking that this is a physical experience, I think that is very traumatic problem for the experiencer in trying to get free from the experience. I think they have to understand the whole truth of the experience. And if the truth is that it's not physical, then I can't support the book that it states that it is. And it's a real shame because it was a good job on the book. It got the information out there. But, you know, that just like what happened with Nick Redford, you know, the more he did the research, the more he got into it, the more he realized his thinking had to change, you know. And recently it's done that.
Okay. Now, I mentioned to you we're going to do a two-parter on this. Originally, we had scheduled a half hour. We're going to roll and do another half hour. I think that first half hour is about done. But I want to give you some quotes that I found interesting from the book. You said there was a larger camp that study us. They take our DNA either to renew their own biological structure or manipulate our DNA to make us better on an evolutionary advancement, beneficial in the long run to us. That's a belief. And then there's a minority view that this thing is malevolent. And you ask, couldn't they learn about human DNA structure from a small group of abductees? And couldn't they even get volunteers? So do you want to comment on that?
Well, this is the same type of red flag that that Nick Redford's come across. You know, the question is, how many times does you know, a human being have to be probed and DNA taken from them to figure out that, hey, this is what we need to do to make this hybrid or whatever that they're leading us to believe that's happening. You know, Nick Redford saw it from an aspect of how many times do these aliens have to come here from across the galaxy and dig a soil sample on the side of the road. You know, that was a red flag that made him wonder, how many times does that have to happen? That doesn't make any sense. You know, so the whole thing that we're seeing here actually is a cover for something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very interesting. Then you go on, you make a comment that all abductees have had some sort of involvement in the occult. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, there's some questions that the secular researchers still don't have answers for. And one of them is, why do certain people have this experience? Well, in our research with all of these experiencers over the years that we've worked with, which have been hundreds, we found a commonality between them that answers that question. And actually, we found three answers to that same question, where it's either one of the answers or a combination of one of the three. And what we found was, why does this happen to certain people? Well, some people actually ask for the experience. And believe it or not, I've been at conferences and I've worked the vendor tables where I've heard people say, I wish I could have that experience so I could understand it.
Yep.
You know, and what I say to those people is, be careful what you ask for.
I agree.
The second one is more common, is we found that almost every single person who's become an abduction experiencer or even involved in a UFO experience has had some type of dabblings in the metaphysical realm, the New Age realm, or the occult realm. And what we're seeing here is involvement in those realms seem to be an open door for this experience to happen in your life. And then the third one we found, which was a little difficult on us getting an answer for it in the beginning, but we finally were able to answer it by doing a little deeper research. And that's when people came to us and they said, you know, I don't fit your answer for number one, your answer for number two, because I remember having these experiences since I was 5, 6, 7 years old. And that puzzled us, you know, listening to that. So we started looking at the research and the way we investigated these cases. And I started going back and I started asking these experiencers in particular about their family life that they could remember as a child. And what we found in every instance was the parents had opened the door to the experience by their activities that they were doing that were outside of what we would call biblical normalcy. In other words, they were involved in the occult or New Age or whatever practices that left the door open for the family members, to be affected by this experience. And the scripture that talks about that says that the head of the household has the spiritual covering over the family. So if you're a head of a household, you have children, and you don't have that spiritual covering over your family, that biblical covering that's asked for, then your family is as wide open to the enemy's tactics as you are.
But you also made some other comments in here about abductees. There's more than one sort of alien. Abductees are taken to underground facilities where there are hybrid creatures, hybrid humanoids, vats of colored liquid filled with human body parts. Humans are drained of blood, mutilated, dismembered, stacked like lifeless cords of wood. The aliens come and remove young children and say the children belong to us. Aliens have forced abductees to have relations with them. Aliens make predictions of global chaos and destruction, and the humans will be rescued by these aliens and the planet saved by these aliens. And you say, beware of false prophets. Absolutely.
And what you were quoting there was from the late Dr. Carla Turner.
Oh, okay.
And I have to believe that she was so very close to the truth on all of this before she passed away. I just don't know how close she got, but I listened to a lot of her stuff there at the very end before she passed on. And, I just have to think in my heart that, man, she was right on to exposing what was happening here, but just didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah, and she died of cancer like many UFO researchers. What was she, maybe 57, somewhere, not that
right.
old? Yeah, I mean, she died of a fast-acting cancer like so many others that seem to not have the same lifespan when you get involved in this. But you go on to say that there's 10 dimensions, 4 are visible, 6 are invisible. They defy the laws of physics. You mentioned Hynek and Vallée, and who say that these visitors are from other dimensions. I mean, I've read where they said they're not from outer space.
Right.
They're transdimensional, malevolent, and the plan is to change human beings. Any comments on that?
Well, Vallée was right on that, and I've read his stuff, and I think a lot of people forget our history, and that's normal in society, is we forget history. We don't remember what's happened in the past, and that's why it happens again. And I think the same things happen in the UFO realm. There's been a lot of good research done 50 years ago that new people coming into the realm today don't go back and read the old stuff. They don't realize that somebody has done some really good work, and we end up rehashing the same thing over and over again, But these guys were spot on. They realized there was problems with this just being, a physical extraterrestrial entity. They realized that can't be exactly what we're seeing here. There's too many red flags that say that we're dealing with something else. And a lot of them realize that we seem to be dealing with something that's been around for a long time, something that shows up in a lot of religious history and mythological history.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Then you go on to say, this quote, this may not be from you though, there is no life outside of life on Earth in the universe. There is, however, other life on Earth that cannot be seen at will, that lives in other dimensions. When the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on Earth? So that, again, that's this invisible entities that live here that a lot of people don't want to accept.
Right. And that the quote there that, was referring to no other life in the universe. And, I take that stance myself. I don't think we're ever going to find intelligent life, sentient life, anywhere else in the universe. I think we are that special. And I think this phenomenon, you know, you mentioned a minute ago that it changes our mindset, it changes our thinking. And I think that's the purpose of the whole phenomenon in itself. At this time in history, the powers that are behind this deception, this delusion of the UFO abduction phenomenon, you know, the purpose is to take us away from the one true God, you know, because it supports everything that's unbiblical. I mean, everything that has to do with the phenomenon is the opposite of anything having to do with Christian religion, you know. And why is that? You know, that's another red flag you have to look at. You know, even the communications that people have had, the contactees with these entities, you know, it's always anti-Christ, anti-God, anti-creation, you know, anti-Jesus Christ. You know, why would they come all the way across the universe to attack one particular religion when we have so many other different belief systems in the world? You know, why is it just this one? And then you have to step back and look at it, and you go, you know, there's only really two belief systems in the world. There's those that follow Jesus Christ and all of the others that do not. You know, so there's really only two. And another way to look at that is this whole religion that, you know, that's about Jesus Christ and God of the Bible, you know, that is one that people come to the saving grace of Jesus Christ freely. There's no charge, there's no works involved, but all of the other belief systems are works-based religions. You know, you have to do something. Even the metaphysical New Age teachings are just another type of, you know, works-based religion. You're on a quest for enlightenment. You have to do something to be able to reach that point of enlightenment. But, you know, you never do. You know, it's unobtainable. The only one that's obtainable is the one that's given freely, and that's through Jesus Christ. And I think that's what this entity fears, and that's what this entity wants to deceive us from.
You go on actually in the book to say why couldn't they go get all the genetic material from 10 or 20 humans? Why do they go out of their way to discredit the God of the Bible and leave all the other religions and gods alone? Why are they focused on denying Jesus Christ? I mean, it's an extremely good point.
You know, and these are what I call red flags. And when you add up all the red flags, you've got to step back and go, wait a minute, there's a problem here. I just can't keep stashing the red flags under the carpet, you know, and hope they'll go away. And that's something that, you know, when I first started doing the talks on the UFO circuit, I called my talk in Roswell in 2007, an unwanted piece of the UFO puzzle. And the reason I titled it that is because that's the way I felt that this research was being handled by the secular realm. Is here you had researchers that all had a piece of the UFO puzzle, and they were trying to put this picture together, see what was behind it. But when I started to bring pieces of the puzzle to the table, they said, "Oh no, we don't want that one." You know, and I understand why, is because when I bring my piece of the puzzle to the table, they're afraid it's going to change the picture that they think they're expecting to see. And that scares.
Joe, you go on to say that official disclosure will be a mix of lies and deceit, dictated to you by governments infested with liars and by fallen angels who serve the father of all lies, Satan. I mean, you know, you look at that quote and you look at what goes on in governments, you know, as much as you even criticize our government, you know, I mean, you look around the world, how people are treated, no human rights, you know, sentenced to hard labor over nothing. You know, you have to agree with that. Joe, any comments? What's the view from South Korea on this? And here's another question. What's the view from South Korea on Jesus? Because I don't think that's their guy over there, or am I wrong?
Actually, there's about 60% of the population now is Christianity.
Oh, okay.
And it's a mix of Catholicism and a mix of, you know, Protestantism. Since the war, you know, back in the 50s, The whole country was devastated, and some of the first people to come over here and help out in this country and bring it back up on its feet, were a lot of the major churches. And they brought a lot of missionaries over to set up schools and orphanages and to be able to get the people fed. So a lot of them cling to that support, and a lot of them were able to change their teachings from Buddhism, to Christianity. And, it's happening more and more and more. One of the topics that you hear about in the United States at UFO conferences, you hear speakers saying that this UFO phenomenon, abduction phenomenon, is a worldwide event. It's happening everywhere. They want you to believe that. Well, I've been over here, going on 5 years now, and I've had a real good opportunity to talk to the Korean people and get a better understanding about this phenomenon in relation to this foreign country and also Japan. And, this is not a worldwide event, as the leading researchers want you to believe. There may be a dozen or, so sightings reported in Korea over the past 20 years. It's just not something that they're seeing here or even interests them. As far as the abduction experience, I get laughed at for bringing that up to a normal Korean. What do you think of the alien abduction experience? We think that's totally science fiction. That's Hollywood. It doesn't happen. And that's another red flag that you have to bring up. Why is it 2.3 million people estimated in America, but not here in Korea? What's the difference? Why is it different? And you have to ask those questions.
That's a good point. So basically you're saying that this abduction phenomenon has focused on Western society and Christians, basically.
And I have my ideas on why that's that way. I think there's a relationship between progress in your society in the link to how many sightings or abductions you're experiencing, believe it or not. And it's something I've been able to look at. You take the U.S. We've been successful in the industrial realm and financial realm for many years. So the average American has a lot of time on his hands. So what does he end up doing? He's bored. He watches TV. He gets bored with the TV shows. He goes on the internet, and he becomes a conspiracy freako, following who knows what type of ideas. And some of those ideas are UFOs and extraterrestrials. It's a number two focal point out on the internet, second to sex.
Yep.
But you take a country like Korea, where they're still coming out of a major devastation only 60 years ago. But yet they're one of the leading countries in the world for technology. They've done that by struggling. They've done that by focusing. They've done that by making sure that everything they need to do, is done right. These kids over here go to school 10 to 12 hours a day, not because they have to, because they want to. These kids, they don't even have a national focus here. These kids have a worldwide focus. They don't want to be the best in their country. They want to be the best in the world. So they don't have any time on their hands to focus on crazy ideas like chemtrails or cattle mutilations or crop circles or UFOs or aliens. So guess what? They don't have them. So you have to look at that and go, wow, if that's the relationship that we're seeing here, is time on your hands compared to, how much, whether you can have time on your hands because of your progress and your focal point. That's something that needs to be looked at. Because I make trips to Japan 4 times a year for my job, and I get a chance to talk to Japanese people and look at them too. Well, Japan seems to be about 30 years ahead of Korea right now. They've had a chance to become successful in the financial world and the industrial world ahead of Korea. So Japanese people have a little bit of time on their hands that they can start looking at other things and other studies. Well, guess what? You start finding people with interest in UFOs and abductions in Japan. Not near the level we see in the U.S., but definitely a larger scale by far than what you see here in Korea. So I definitely see, a relationship between where you're at in your progress of your country to how much the experience and the phenomenon affects you. And that is a red flag.
Yeah, well, you answered one of my questions. I've given lectures, and it's even in my books. I would say, I don't understand it. If I flew here and I was in a UFO, and you would think you'd be able to look at the world and say, let's see, the northern countries all got these nuclear weapons. Why would I even go to the United States, right? Why wouldn't I just go to Africa, Southeast Asia? I would go to who is less militarized, less civilized. And I would always say that. I don't understand. Why does it happen in the United States, which would have the ability to fight back, where other countries don't? But you kind of answered that question, that they're fighting against powers and principalities. They're fighting, they're fighting. It's the religious aspect to it. With Christianity is what the answer is.
It could be them with the missiles and everything else too.
Well, that's the scary thing. When you look at end time prophecy and Revelations and stuff. And I said it at the conference in Erie, when when disclosure comes, it's not, to me, that's the end of days.
Right.
When a disclosure comes, it's the start of end of days. Now you conclude your book by talking about find other like-minded people. The stronger you are in Jesus, the less you will be harassed, and after a while, they will leave you alone altogether. Tell them to leave in Jesus' name, and they are obligated to go. You are a threat to them. They will move on to other people who do not know Jesus yet. And Joe, I told you about some of the things that have happened to me. And, the most amazing thing when I think about it, I'm in my bedroom, and the creaking, the sounds, the movement in the ceiling, something's poking me, and I drive it off through the name of Jesus. I kind of fall asleep. I open my eyes. I'm in pitch blackness now. And the creaking sound was incredible, like it was coming at me. I did it again. And Fred, I'm telling you, I saw a veil of darkness just lift. The light came in the windows. It was moonlight. I looked, I saw the light. I mean, when these things happen, you don't really know what's going on. Why is it so dark? I was saying, was there an eclipse or something? I saw this veil of darkness just lift, but they're not gone yet, Joe. This is the issue I'm having right now. I called my Catholic church yesterday, 2 days ago, and it's like this is the second time now. I've left my information. Nobody calls back. I hear it in the house. It's still up there. It's very weak. The movement in the attic. There was a tiny creak before I went away on vacation. I kind of laughed and said, "Is that the best you got?" Which I shouldn't do. You shouldn't challenge them. But I saw firsthand proof, and we had the county commissioner here for Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, on the show 5 episodes ago, who talked about the demon of Brownsville Road that haunted his house, and he said, he was able to drive it out through an exorcist in Pittsburgh, and he has the faith of an apostle. He never met Jesus like the apostles did, but that wording stuck with me. He has the faith of an apostle because he saw he was able to drive it out. Now, I almost got it driven out, but I know it's still there. It's still lurking, and I need to get somebody in from the Catholic Church to get rid of this thing.
Let me give you a little input on this, John. And this is actually working with hundreds of cases and understanding, 20 years later how this works. The help itself is not going to come from the Catholic Church. The help itself is going to come from Jesus Christ. Okay? This is about a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. The authority that was given to you through the Holy Spirit as a Christian was given to you specifically, and it's the same authority that Jesus Christ had when he was walking the earth before he was crucified. God gave Jesus authority over everything above the earth, below the earth, and on the earth. Okay? When Jesus was crucified and left to go on to be on the right hand of the Father, the Holy Spirit came, and that Holy Spirit indwelling in every believer gives us that same authority that Jesus had when he was on the earth. The enemy doesn't want the average person to believe that they have that authority, but we do. Scripture tells us we do. Okay? It's not by ritual, it's not by a talisman, it's not by any type of physical object like a crucifix or holy water. It's strictly through the personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That's where the authority comes from. That's where it is. And that's what you have to remind the enemy, that that's where that power comes from. But let me keep another thing in mind for you as you stay in this realm and try to put this truth out there. We're in a spiritual war, not a physical war with extraterrestrials. We're in a spiritual war with spiritual beings that are disguising themselves as these extraterrestrials. That's their deception. That's the facade that they're coming in to deceive us. You've uncovered also this deception. And you're one of the challengers that's going out there like myself, and you want to share this truth, and you want to fight this spiritual war with truth, okay? Don't think that these entities are pissed at you. Don't think that they're going to let you easily slide in and try and uncover their tactics. Okay, they're going to continue to fight. What you must realize is you don't fight this fight alone. You've got the creator of the universe at your side when you go into battle and battle these entities. That's something that you need to understand. What I have found in the research, if you want this to stop completely, to be terminated from your life, any of this activity from the enemy, you have to walk away from this 100%. You have to clear all of it out of your life. But I commend you, and I commend anybody that once they find the truth, they want to go back and share the truth, that they're willing to go back into the battle instead of being somebody on the sideline watching the battle.
You know, that's what my son says. Dad, get out of the UFO field. Get completely out of it. Get rid of all the books, the statues, all the things in the basement, him, all the, you know, get out of it. But, you know, I said to my son, Nolan, that's not me. Did the apostles, you know, they didn't say they knew Jesus, but afterwards they came out and talked. Did they hide and run and not tell people? I said, I feel like I got an obligation here to tell people what's going on. That this demonic realm is real, and I believe that this abduction thing is the demonic realm. You know, now I differ with you that I think there could be life elsewhere in the universe. It would be really scary to think we're it. But, you know, that might be it. We may just be the only ones in the entire universe because, you know, God can do whatever he wants. He don't have a budget. If he wants to create 1 trillion planets, okay. If he wants 2 trillion, okay. So, you know, I want to stand and fight. You know, that's what I want to do. If that thing appears, I'm going to rip its throat out. I'm going to hit it with an uppercut. I'm going to stand and fight. I'm not going to cut and run. And Joe, thanks for being on our show. We've talked 2 episodes, a total of an hour. Thank you for Skyping in from South Korea, and we will stay in touch. And I will see you at the MUFON Symposium in Orlando, and we will have dinner, and it's on me. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, John. Thank you, Fred.
You take it easy, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you.